Masachet Brachot, Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Okay, I'm going to start with the words of the Gemara. In the recording, you're going to see that the Tosafot is just copied below, just so it could all fit on one page. Gemara, Shema mina mitzvot tzrichot kavana. Learn from it. We learn from it, meaning the Mishnah. Bless me. Okay, we learn from it. It's a real live recording. We learn from it, meaning the Mishnah, that mitzvot require intention. Okay, how did we learn that from the Mishnah? So if you look back in the Mishnah started by saying, Haya korei b'Torah v'higia zman hamikra. If someone was reading from a Sefer Torah and it came time to say Shema, im kivein libo yatsa. If he intends in his heart, he fulfills his obligation, which implies that in order to fulfill your obligation of a mitzvah, you would need to have kavana, intention. So now the Gemara asks the question, my im kivein libo, what does it mean to if he has intent in his heart? What does it mean to have intention? Likrot, to read. In order to fulfill your obligation of reading Kriyat Shema, you need to have intention to read, that you're reading. But then the Gemara rejects it and says, Likrot, to read, v'hakakare, and he was already reading. Behold, he was already reading. The person in the Mishnah, Haya korei b'Torah, he was reading from the Mishnah. So how could it be, he was reading from the Sefer Torah. So how could it be that having kavana means to do the action, if that's what he was already doing? The Mishnah said, im kivein libo, if he fulfills his obligation, which implies that he would need to do something different from what he was doing in the beginning of this case. So the Gemara resolves this by saying, bekorei lahagia. It was when he was reading to correct. So when the person in the Mishnah set out to read from the Sefer Torah, he didn't set out to read, he started out reading to correct. And in order to fulfill his obligation of Kriyat Shema, he would need to change his kavana from reading to correct to just reading. So this is where we learn Rashi and Tosafot in order to better understand what does it mean to read in order to correct. And Rashi and Tosafot have a machloket about it. So I'm going to read the Rashi first. Bekorei lahagia, reading to correct. Et hasefer im yesh bo ta'ut. He's reading the Sefer Torah to see if it has a mistake in it, to see if there was a mistake in one of the letters. Da'afilu lekriya nami lo mitkavein, that even for reading also he didn't intend. That he didn't even intend to read. When he was reading, he was thinking to himself, I'm looking for mistakes. Okay, on the other hand, we have Tosafot, bekorei lahagia, pirish bekuntra she'ein mitkavein likrot. So Tosafot quotes Rashi, Kuntra is Rashi. Rashi explains that he did not have intention to read. But Tosafot has an issue with this. Tema, akate hakakare. But it is a wonder, it's puzzling, because he was still reading, right? According to Rashi's explanation, the person who was reading from the Sefer Torah was still reading. It was just he was reading and thinking, I'm reading in order to find mistakes. So Tosafot feels that Rashi's answer does not fit well with the Gemara's Shak Levatari, the Gemara's back and forth, because in the Gemara's whole issue with the original answer that kavana means likrot, to read, is that the person was already reading. Al karchacha, so against your will, right, you would have to say, nireh, it seems that the answer is, bekorei lahagia, that he was reading to correct, she'eno korei hatevo kehilchatan u'kenikuratan, that he was not reading the letters according to their halacha, with their proper nikudot, right? Because in the Sefer Torah, you don't have nikudot included in the Sefer Torah, it's just the letters. So when this person was reading from the Sefer Torah, they were not reading it with the proper pronunciation of the words. Ella k'ktivatan kare. Rather, the person was reading from the Sefer Torah as the words were written. In order to understand where there were things missing or things that were extra. So for example, litatefet umizuzat, right? Those are words where there's not that extra, instead of the, right, we pronounce it with an extra vav at the end, but when it's actually written out, it doesn't contain that vav. So you could pronounce it, right? We would say letotafot or mizuzot, but if you would actually read it from a Sefer Torah, you could pronounce it as, you could assume that it's supposed to say letatefet or mizuzat. Ve'im kivein libo lav dafka. And when it says in the Mishnah, and if he intends in his heart, it's not specifically referring to actual intention. Ella kilomar likrot kedin kinekudatan v'kilchatan. Rather, it's as if to say that the person should instead read the Kriyat Shema according to the ruling of how you're supposed to pronounce it with the proper vowels. So at the end of the day, we have this Rashi that's saying that kavana means that right, you actually have to be thinking, I'm doing the action associated with this mitzvah. I'm reading as opposed to I'm looking for mistakes. But Tosfot actually doesn't even think that kavana is really kavana. He says Tosfot would say lav dafka. It's not actually specifically referring to kavana. It's really just trying to say you're supposed to do the action of the mitzvah properly. So if somebody would be reading from a Sefer Torah, they would fulfill their mitzvah as long as they were saying the words according to the halacha of how we're supposed to pronounce Kriyat Shema.